Welcome to a New Beginning podcast. I'm your host, Maureen Doyle. I'm a certified life coach, author, and coffee enthusiast. Did you know that at any moment you can create a new beginning in your health, relationships, career, or mindset? Each week, I will share simple strategies to transform your life and create new beginnings. Ready to start yours? Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. As we're entering into the holiday season, December, lots of different emotions can start to come up, and one of those might be grief. And today I want to share with you my thoughts on grief and what I believe are the 3 parts of grief. We could be grieving for so many different reasons. It could be the loss of a relationship. It could be a divorce, or it could be a death of a loved one. And here's what's happening when someone in our life is no longer with us. First, we experience the loss of a loved one in our heart. We feel it in our heart. And it doesn't matter how much time has passed. So many have talked about different time frames around grief. And people around us might say, it's been a long time. Why don't you feel better? Are you still grieving? And what I believe is that it takes as long as it takes. There's no prescribed time frame. Grief is a noun, and it can pop up at any time. Sometimes it just comes over you like a wave, completely unexpected. Maybe you hear some music and it reminds you of someone that you're missing. It could be a movie, it could be food, it could be a scent. And when that comes up, allow it. Let it move through you. Let it happen. Don't try to stop it, because when you do that, it just stays in your body. You might think that it's a good idea to push it aside, but I promise you, it's just hanging out in your body, and it's getting bigger. That emotion is getting larger. It's not going anywhere. And then there's grieving. Grieving is a verb, an action word. The action of grieving needs to happen because, just as I've said, if you try to avoid it, it just stays there. It stays with you and it grows. What we resist persists. Instead, take a moment to feel the grief. Take a moment to grieve. When you feel this emotion, when it comes up, it's just a sign that you have experienced a great love with a person that is no longer with you. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's the first part of grief. Here's the second part. Not only are you grieving the loss of someone, you could also be grieving the future that you envisioned with that person. You had plans, you had dreams, you had goals, and now that is gone. And it's important to grieve that loss also. Sometimes my clients tell me that when they get a divorce that they wanted after leaving an unhealthy relationship, they feel grief and it confuses them. They wanted the divorce. And the people in their life are certainly confused by their grief as well. Everyone wants to throw them a party, and they don't want a party. What they're doing is they're grieving. They're grieving the future that they had envisioned for themselves with this person. They have to grieve this loss of the dream before they can create a new future and create a new dream. And if they try to avoid it, push away the grief, it's just going to stick around. You know, holding back feelings of grief is like holding a beach ball underwater. It's exhausting. and eventually it'll pop up. So why not allow the grief to move through you when it shows up? Which leads me to another topic, judgment. Quite often when we're experiencing grief due to the loss of a relationship or even the loss of someone, we judge ourselves. We ask ourselves, why are we still grieving? What is wrong with me? It's been such a long time. And that actually makes us feel worse. And again, it doesn't allow us space and time to actually grieve. So please, drop the judgment. And finally, here's the third part of grief that has to do with our brain. Because the first two parts had to do with our heart. This has to do with our brain. We continue to think about the person that we have lost because our brain is looking for that person. Have you ever noticed that you could be feeling fine and all of a sudden the thought pops into your mind to call that person, to reach out, to share a story, to check in, or to plan a holiday event? Our brains are just trying to be helpful. You see, the human brain is very efficient. And when we do something a few times, as we do in a relationship, like making phone calls and planning events and planning visits, our brain then takes that information and downloads it into our mind as a habit, as a routine. And this allows our mind to be free to process any other incoming information that is new. It actually frees up space in our mind to do that. So when you notice your brain reminding you to call a loved one that is gone, don't judge it. Just open up to it and instead thank your mind for doing its job. And in the case of a breakup or a divorce, just let your brain know that person is no longer here, and that's okay. Over time, the habit part of your brain will start to catch up with your reality. To this day, my mind will tell me to call my mom or dad that have been gone for years and share with them some news. Or a wave of grief will wash over me when I least expect it, and I will feel the loss of them, that they're no longer with me. Years ago, I would stop the grief, or I would stop the grief wave and just stuff it down. Now I allow it, and I feel the appreciation of the love and the connection that we had. I open up to it, and I let it move through me. So remember, there are 3 parts to grief. Number 1, your heart is missing that person. Number 2, your heart is also grieving the loss of the future that you envisioned with that person. And 3, your mind is looking for that person. It hasn't caught up to the reality that that person is no longer here. So have patience and compassion with yourself. Open up to the feeling of grief when it shows up. Remember, what you resist persists. Drop any self-judgment. Thoughts like, I should be over it. Why is it taking so long? Just drop those. And then gently remind your brain that person is no longer here, and be patient to let your brain catch up with your reality. Sending lots of love to anyone experiencing grief this holiday season. Talk to you next week. If you enjoyed this podcast, check out my free workbook, 6 Secrets to Getting Anything That You Want. Head over to maureen-doyle.com/6secretsguide to pick up your free copy today.